Good evening. Not safe. That's how staff described the accident and emergency departments at Worcestershire Acute Hospitals NHS Trust during an unannounced inspection in March. The Care Quality Commission's report found that services at Worcestershire Royal and the Alexandra in Redditch were overwhelmed. It found that there were not enough nurses, only one consultant on site covering both hospitals after 5 p.m. and insufficient space to assess patients. Our health correspondent Michele Paduano reports.
John Flaherty died weeks after the Care Quality Commission inspection in March. The 55-year-old had broken his hip and had an epileptic fit in hospital. His daughter now knows that for 4 hours he was in pain. The ambulance service brought in a doctor normally employed during disasters because the hospital couldn't cope.
To see someone else have to go through that because of other people's mistakes or lack of training, whatever it is, it's horrible. We just want it to be improved. I mean, at some point we're all going to need that hospital, and if it stays as it is or gets worse, there's no hope for any of us.
The findings of the Care Quality Commission make stark reading. There was no evidence shifts were planned to reflect how sick the patients were. Equipment on resuscitation trolleys was out of date. The staff reported a lack of support from senior managers in the department. No one from the Care Quality Commission was available for interview. The Chief Inspector, Sir Mike Richards, has placed a condition on the Trust registration, saying significant work is needed to improve services at the Trust so that it meets the standards that people have a right to expect. The infamous packed corridors are now empty, the signs identifying where patients were taken off the walls. The Trust has increased bed capacity and staffing. It's also created dedicated areas for prioritising patients and says it's beginning to work.
I think it was a call to arms. I think all of our staff have responded absolutely superbly. We've managed to make changes that have now cleared the corridor, and things are looking a lot better, but we know we've got more to do.
The family of John Flaherty know he received poor care, as did many others. We don't know if patients died unnecessarily.
It's been extremely hard for all of us, and I think that we're trying to come to terms with what has happened, and we're not going to see him again.
The Trust accepts its failures.
The fact that we've had patients' cardiac arrest on the corridor is unacceptable. You know, we can't say that that's great care, and we're very sorry about that. Obviously, moving forward, we have to make sure that corridor now stays empty.
The big question now is how to enlarge a hospital that was built too small.
And Michele Paduano is outside the Worcestershire Royal Hospital for us tonight. What's likely to happen going forward?
Well, there are plans, I understand, to try and expand the size of the accident and emergency department, and that seems vital. There are question marks, of course, over the enormous debts this trust has, and as to what happens to the Chief Executive, Penny Venables, and the Chief Operating Officer, Stuart Messer, who are currently off long-term sick. The Trust still wants to reorganise the accident emergency services across the county, and let's be clear about this, Redditch didn't come out with a clean bill of health in this report. GPs across the county are saying, though, well, you can't really do all that until you sort out the problems here. I understand that the hospital has actually brought into place a new emergency department senior doctor who is going to actually look forward and try and bring plans for public consultation by autumn.
Michele, thank you. It's not just Worcestershire hospitals who are struggling with demand. 5 years after the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham opened its doors, it's running at maximum capacity. This year it will treat 1 million patients, and managers say it's feeling the strain. Catherine Stan-Cheshan reports.
It was never the plan, but 170 beds in the old QE hospital are once again occupied. The QE says it's been forced to use these beds as figures hit a record 1 million patients for the current 12-month period. This is the link bridge between the old QE and the new hospital. It was only ever supposed to be temporary. It's now a permanent thoroughfare as numbers of patients have gone up and up. And now there's nowhere else to go.
To be honest, there's not any more of the old hospital that we can open up now. And I think the reality is that as a health and social system within Birmingham is that just simply opening more and more capacity in acute hospitals isn't the answer.
The QE's 5 years old today. Its trauma unit has been one of its biggest success stories, something that Matti Katerzebek knows all too well after a motorbike crash 8 weeks ago left him severely injured.
The team here done an excellent job. I had a fractured skull, I've got a few plates in my cheekbone, in my jaw, and obviously inside my upper jaw.
The Centre for Defence Medicine is also here, which has treated injured soldiers from Afghanistan, as well as victims of conflict in Ukraine and the schoolgirl Malala Yousafzai.
All those measures have taken forward into civilian practice, both here and nationally. And when you combine that with the pre-existing expertise and reputation of this hospital, the ethos of all of that means that we have a world-class trauma service here.
But it's not all rosy. Recently, the finance officer for the trust that runs the hospital has said it needs to make £60 million worth of savings. And bosses say a new plan is needed. Catherine Stancheshan, BBC Midlands Today, Birmingham.
Well, we can go live now to the QE to talk to the Chief Executive of the hospital's trust, Dame Julie Moore. 1 million patients treated this year, and we've just heard in that report that you're full to capacity. How can you cope with more patients?
Well, we're trying to find different ways of looking after patients, but in any other walk of life, you'd say this is a great success, that more and more people want to be treated here. We're managing as a health service to treat more people, so more people stay older, live with many diseases. And actually, when I started off as a nurse, people would die in their 40s and 50s of heart attacks. Now people are living to their 80s and 90s, but of course they have ill health, and so we're able to treat them now. So in many ways it's a good news story, and we don't view it as a bad news story, actually.
We see the problems coming out of Worcestershire Hospitals Trust today, and there are proposals to downgrade services at Redditch. I mean, this could have huge implications for the QE as patients look to go to Birmingham instead. But could you take up the slack? Are you worried that that's going to happen?
We've been very worried about what's been happening south of us for some time now. It's very important that the Alex continues to have a thriving department that people can go to acutely, because we haven't got the capacity to take those patients. They see very large numbers that we just couldn't cope with here. And it's been under review now for about 4 years, and we, like everybody else, are anxiously waiting for the result of that review and how services are going to be provided.
I mean, campaigners are suggesting that your trust takes over the running of Redditch. What do you think about that?
Well, we'd be very interested to get into those discussions, because it's in nobody's interests for the Alex not to work really well as an acute hospital for the people of Redditch and Bromsgrove and surround, and it's not in the people of Birmingham's interest for us to be completely overwhelmed as well. We need both hospitals to work really well.
And finally,
we would be very interested in talking to how we can support it.
And I was just saying, lastly, you've got £60 million of savings to make, so what does the next 5 years hold?
Well, they look very difficult, and that's come about because the price we're paid for delivering the work we're currently doing is being cut to cope with the financial situation of the whole NHS. It's not that we've got more expensive or that we've got in any way less efficient. We continue to be one of the more efficient hospitals in the country, but there's not enough or as much money as there used to be to pay for the high-tech services that we provide here. And it's mostly in those highly specialised services that we're seeing the funding being reduced.
OK, Dame Julie, thanks for joining us tonight. Derry Londonderry's had it, Hull has now got it, and Coventry wants it. Today, the city announced ambitious plans to become City of Culture 2021. It's claimed a winning bid could bring an £80 million boost to the economy and create more than 1,000 jobs. Joan Cummins reports.
Coventry precinct alive to the sound of a classical busker, an image that cultural ambassadors for the city hope will become commonplace as Coventry gears up for its City of Culture bid. Businessman David Burbidge is leading the group, determined to get Coventry on the cultural map.
And actually, I'm afraid even people in Coventry sometimes talk down their own city, but we're a great city, and we want to showcase Coventry to the world, to the UK. To make people see the great city that it really is.
Coventry traditionally is low-key about its successes,